Welcome back. Now we're going to look at some settings we can set on an entire Google site. So things that will not just affect one page, but will affect all the contents of the site. Found in the same area as page settings, under the settings gear, are site actions. And the first one we should look at is sharing and permissions. Unlike a lot of things that you create in different Google applications such as Docs or whatever, the default application for creating a website can be public on the web, so you have to be careful about this. So you can see that right now this is public on the web, and that means anyone on the internet can find and view it, meaning it's being indexed by search engines, including Google. You can change that. You can make it pretty available by giving anyone with the link access, meaning that anyone who has the web address can get to it, but it won't be indexed by search engines, or at least it won't be indexed by Google. When you make a setting like this, there are no guarantees. You're dependent on the ethical behavior of the search engines, and certainly there are search engines out there that will not honor this, that will collect this information. You can share it with specific people, which is a great option when you're using a site for some type of project development. When I'm writing curriculum with 4 people, this is the perfect option. I simply turn this to specific people, invite the other 3 people, and we have a nice isolated space to work. Okay, if you're in a Google Apps district, which a lot of you will be, you'll likely see additional options, and there'll be variations on these too. One will be specific people within your organization. Another will be anyone with the link from your organization, meaning they have to be logged in with their Google Apps Gmail address in order to get there. But if they're part of your domain, they would be allowed to get there just with the link. Okay, so those are the different options. So I'll just save that for specific people for right now. Now, underneath it also lists the individual people who have been invited. So you can see that no one has been invited. I'm the owner. It's now private, and no one else has been invited. So I'm going to invite someone else. And of course, I have the option to give them either edit privileges, view privileges. You know, unlike Docs, there's no level of comment privileges here. They can either see the site or they can edit it. Or I could actually make them a co-owner, and that would give them the ability to share with others, etc. So I can make them an equal partner in this. I'm going to leave them with edit privileges. I can choose to notify them or not to notify them. So in a lot of cases, I found that although we use a lot of Google products, we may not be using Gmail itself, and so people may have these Gmail accounts that they don't check on a regular basis. And if that's the case, then notifying them really isn't going to do any good. I'm going to have to send them maybe an email through their normal email channel, or I might see them in the hallway or something else to tell them. But if this is something you want to do, you can not only notify them, you can give them a specific message here, or a custom message that you design instead of letting Google design it. If you choose not to do that, Google will simply send a generic message saying that you've been asked to edit or be a partner in the site at the edit level. If you'd like a copy for your records, pick send a copy to myself. Here I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm just going to say OK. So I'm not sending a message. And it's going to warn me that if I don't send them, they have to sign in before they notice what you've shared. True, but I'm just going to say that I'm going to talk to them or contact them in some other way. Now, this is the actual link that they could use to get to the site. You can see that it's only accessible by collaborators. If this was more open to the public, then this would just be the link that I would share generally, or post somewhere on a website to allow anybody to get to it. You also have the option on this screen to enable page level permissions, which didn't exist with the original Google Docs, but it exists now. So if you turn on page level permissions, it's going to allow me to make particular pages available to particular people and to exclude them from other pages in the site. So it might not be something, in a lot of cases it's not something I use. If I'm working on curriculum and 3 people are involved and they really need access to everything on the site, then that's what we do. But there are other times where you may choose to take sections or pages of the site and restrict access. Now you can see that this menu was loaded when I turned on my page level permissions, and this is showing me all the pages I currently have. I'm clicked at the top level, which is the entire site, and you can see that these are the permissions people have to the entire site. And if I do want to give any additional people access to this site, I must do it at the top level. I can edit or remove positions at permissions at a lower level, but they have to exist at this top level. So let's take a look at how to do that. If I come over to best practices, and I've looked at this change before, there are 2 options under here, and I can always set it back. Actually, I can always say use the same as the top of the site, and that would reset things. But if I want to use custom permissions, I have 2 options, and one is to add users to this page whenever they're added to the top level, and the other is not to add them to the page when they're added to the top level. So let's pick the second. After a minute or so, those changes will save. Okay, great. And let me go to this top level and add a new user, see what happens. And you can see while their name does appear here, there is no level of permission set to the right. So this person actually is listed here because I can optionally give them permission, but they don't currently have it. If I come in here and pick either view or edit, they'll now get those permissions. And if I click the X, you'll see that after a minute or two, let me jump over to another page, come back so that'll refresh. You can see that they're still listed, so I always have the option to go back and give them permission, but they don't currently have permission to the page. Okay, other site settings. We're going to go to the simple one first, unsubscribe from site changes. So if there are global changes to the site, not individual pages, but different setting changes, do you want to be made aware of that? I would say that's a good idea to be notified if other people have permission to make those changes. But if you're the only one who does, then it's unnecessary. There's a manage site link. This contains the site name, and here's a place where you can globally turn off that title, that name at the top. So you can turn it off for all pages right here, or you can edit it. There's something called a site notice, and that's a pop-up message that appears when someone first loads a page or first loads your site. Now, after they see it, they can choose to say, okay, got it, and then it won't appear for them anymore, but it will appear once until they acknowledge it. This box is where I add the actual text of the notice. Okay, and I can choose to display a button on that notice by doing this, and then picking a web page. And what will happen if they pick that particular button, or if they click on it, it'll take them to the web page. So I can choose one of my existing pages in the site. I can go to the outside and simply get an external site link. Or I can use this button down to here to create a new page right on the fly. So the new page title is going to be About Us. And it's going to be a web page. You can see I can even change the type of template that I'm using, and I can create the page. See, About Us appears at the top. I'll say OK. Save. When we return to the site, you're going to see this nice pop-up where you can either click the More Details button, or you can say, OK, got it. So I click More Details. It jumps me to that About Us page. Obviously, I have to go into this page and put some information. This will stay up until such time as I say, OK, got it, and then it will be dismissed. Let's get back to Manage Site and see what some of our other options are. This is the site description we saw while creating the site, and you can edit that here. There's a button to check if this has mature content, which really isn't appropriate for our uses. Landing page. So this is the home page. By default, it's always going to be home, and that's going to be the page we can't delete, but it doesn't have to remain so. I could rename that page. I could also simply change it and say, you know what, that's the page that I really use as a home page. And now when people enter the site, they will enter on that page. Okay, this is just giving you a description of how much space you've used. And these buttons are very handy. You can copy, make a complete duplicate of the site. So if this was something that was useful to me for one project and a good amount of the content might be useful in another project with some editing, I can just simply copy the whole site. I can also publish it as a template. So if I start using sites on a regular basis for a particular purpose, I would lay out a site that just had the bare bones, the framework in there. I could publish this as a template, and then I could use it as a starting point each time for my next site. I also have the option to delete the site in its entirety here. And once you delete it, it's gone. You'll have a limited period of time, I think about 30 days, where you'll find it under deleted sites and you can recover it, but after that, you will not be able to recover it. Google Sites by default come with a search box so that people can search your site. You can configure the search here, and basically by default it's going to enable the search, which you could disable. You could take away a search box, but in most cases I don't see a reason to do that. And by default that search box is going to be a Google search, but it's going to be directed at your site, so it's only going to search within your site. You can change that to general Google search, or you can have both. Okay, so site and or web. And then the default one is the site, or the default one is the web, whichever you choose. And the person will have to change if they want to do the other type of search. Now, you could add additional search providers if you wanted, and by that I mean if you were a big fan of Bing or Yahoo or something else, you could add those in here. I generally find Google to be very, very adequate as a tool to search the site, and being the parent company that built sites, it's just particularly well aligned with that. Okay. This has to do with statistics and analytics. We're not going to get into that in detail, but just know that you can go to Google Analytics, get a key, put it into your website, and then Google will measure a lot of the traffic to your site and make it available to you. Webmaster Tools are more for a commercial site, not for something we would be doing. This defines the language. If I check this box, they're going to try to make this site as mobile friendly as possible, so it works just as well on a phone or a tablet as it does on a computer. This is about allowing someone to put your site within their site, nested, not a link to it, but nested inside one of the pages. And generally not a good idea. I mean, by default they'll be able to be put in other Google sites, but outside sites it is a security risk, so they recommend that we not take this option unless you really need to. Okay, and finally in this area we have access settings. And what that deals with is who is going to be able to see a listing of site activity or recent changes, recent posts, etc. Is it anyone who can view the site, or is it only the collaborators? So the people who have edit privileges. And those same settings can be applied to revision history. So by default, anyone who can see the site can see the recent activity, which is not a bad setting. They visit the site and they should know if something is new. If something is not new, there may be no need to revisit it. And then revision history. So who can see the actual specific changes that occur on particular pages. And that can be anyone who can visit the site, but is most often left as collaborators. Those are the general settings you'll see here. Let me save that. There's also permissions and sharing. You can see this brings us back to the screen we've been on previously. There's a web address link. If you do not want to use the default web address, the one Google provides to you for free, you can add a web address here. Generally, you obtain a web address by paying for it. So if Google Sites was something you wanted to use as your primary website for some type of commercial purpose or some type of more significant presence on the web, you could purchase an address and they would associate it here. Honestly, there's a lot of tools to develop a more professional site. So if I was going to invest the money to do that, this probably would not be the tool I would use. That's just my opinion. Okay, there's also a link for themes, colors, and fonts. And this allows you to change the look of the site. So right now it's this very plain white site with black typing, and that's the one that's selected here, the ski. But you can pick other templates that are available, and you can see that it changes the entire look of the site. Now, once you start with a template, you can do further modifications on that template. And you do that by selecting the components on the template, either the entire page globally, the site header up at the top, the content area, which is over here. Gadgets are things you can add, not used too much anymore. Sidebar gadgets, horizontal navigation. So these are different things that you can configure. Now when you click on each one, like let's just say entire page, by default it's picking up the coloring from the theme that you've chosen. You can choose to either eliminate it altogether. Let me pick one with a little more color to it. Okay, you can, for the entire page, this is background again, you can choose no color, and you see that just disappears from there, although that doesn't work very well because of my text. I would also have to change my text color to make that work, or I can simply choose a different color. Now notice there was a box underneath the colors, so these are your default choices, but you can put a hexadecimal number in here. It'll consist of 6 digits. You can find out on the internet, you can find color palettes, choose a color you want, and get the number for it. And these include characters 0 through 9 and A through F. And it's just a different numbering system that's used for colors, used for other things as well, but certainly used for colors on the internet. So just to be aware of that. Okay, image. You can actually browse and choose an image if you have one available. And of course, selecting the correct image would be important. This particular image is only about this large, and so it repeats. once I do select an image, I have some options. So I can decide if it repeats both horizontally and vertically, or just horizontally. So now it just runs once across the top of the page, or in the case of vertically, once down the side of the page. I could say there is no repeat, which means it exists just once in the upper left-hand corner of the page. If I wanted to put it in a fixed position, I could do that, and then I could change it to maybe center. Now that's not going to work here because this section of the page happens to have a white background on it and obscures it. But I could adjust that as well. Now I can also stretch the picture to make it fill the entire page. Generally not a great idea unless you're dealing with a relatively large picture to start with, because it will pixelate and will not look good. Yeah, horizontal is good. Okay, that's actually down a little lower now because of the way I had the other options centered. So I'm going to make it start at the left and the top, and that should do it. There you go. Now you would also find global settings for the text on the entire page. That would include different fonts, different colors of fonts, link colors, so hyperlink colors, and visited hyperlink colors. So if they look different after you've clicked on them. That's basically what that means. When they first appear on the page, they're this color. But if someone has visited them, clicked on them previously, they are this color. And that's pretty common with hyperlinks, and it's based on the history in the person's browser. So if the person has visited the site, the link is in the history, and therefore it knows what color to do. And you can see that you can format the site header, both background and the title itself. So let me just change the color so you can see that. So you've got the font, the color, the size. Now you're dealing with the content area here. So the color of the content area, I'm going to just, well, it is white. So you can change that. You could put an image in there, etc. So you get the idea. I don't have to go through all of these. In the content area, this is the background. You do have the title of the content area, and then if you've assigned various headers to it, you can style those levels of headings, and you can also style the particular text in that section. So the gadget's not used all that often, etc., but you could play around with all that stuff if you wanted. Horizontal navigation we'll look at in the future, and that's basically taking this menu and having it run this way with drop downs, which is actually a very nice option in a lot of cases. And just know that if you want to do styling of that, you can do that here, and that would include the background, of course the text, selected text, so things you're clicked on at the moment can look different. The color and background can change as opposed to the pieces of the menu that are not selected. This is the drop down area, so when you're hovering over something, does it change? And the layout. Should it be aligned to the left, the center, or the right? And should there be a margin? Should it be pushed off the edges? Okay, so those are all sorts of different ways you can play around in here to change the look of the site, to either pick a theme and stick with it, or to pick a theme and then modify it. Okay, a few other options from this Manage Site area. If you click, I'm going to leave this, I don't want to make the page a mess. Okay, so if I say Recent Site Activity, it's going to show all the things that I've done. And then it's going to provide me links so I can go back and actually see that. If I click on Pages, it just shows me my sitemap, all my current pages in the site. You're seeing here there's an indication that this particular page is not linked with the sharing of the entire site, so I've individually changed that here. Attachments. You can see any files I've uploaded, put in a file cabinet, or attached in other ways. Page templates. You see I have these 4. The announcements, file cabinet, list, and web page. And then if there were user created templates, if I had made a page into a template, it would be listed here. App scripts is something really for programmers. Unless you have an interest in this, it allows you to write some script that would extend the capabilities of sites, but most people don't have the skills or the interest in putting the time into doing it, unless you've already got that skill as a programmer. And deleted items. So it's going to show you things that you have deleted and when they will be permanently deleted. So here I have something in there, but 4 weeks from now it's going to disappear altogether. So this is just kind of a little history of what's gone on in your site and what your resources are. Okay, the last section that we haven't covered under Site Actions is Edit Site Layout. And it's rather extensive, so we're going to do that in another separate video. While we're here, there are 2 additional options that come to the bottom. One is Site Helps. We've looked at that in several contexts, and it simply gives us some help from Google on how to use sites, and the other is to report an issue to Google if you are on a Google site and there seems to be some kind of problem. Okay, we'll return in a minute with a video on the site layout and how to customize that.